There are many rumors about a well located in a small town called Clarksville. One of the rumors was that a man had thrown a coin inside of it and listened to see how far the coin went down. Legend says he never heard the coin land. Allegedly, others have tried it and reported the same thing. Some other people think it could be a gateway to another world, a portal to something not meant for human eyes. Out of all the urban legends about this well, though, the most chilling story was that if you leaned in too close and stared into the abyss too hard, something would stare back at you. For years, the well remained undisturbed. But like all forgotten things, curiosity eventually found its way back. One night, a group of local teenagers, drunk on adrenaline and cheap liquor, decided to put that legend to the test. They had spent the evening daring each other to complete reckless stunts, and when the conversation shifted to the well, they knew there was only way to prove their bravery. With flashlights flickering in the cold night air, they stumbled through the trees, laughter masking the slight hesitation each one felt deep down. When they reached the clearing, the well stood before them, half buried under vines and moss, a relic of something ancient. Its circular stone structure was cracked, aged by time, but the opening remained ominous, blacker than the night itself. One of them, a boy named Kyle, smirked and stepped forward. "Let's settle this once and for all." He picked up a small stone, held it over the darkness, and let it drop. The group listened. Seconds passed, then more. But no sound ever came. The silence stretched unnaturally, a suffocating feeling. They laughed nervously, but their unease grew when the group didn't hear anything. They then challenged Kyle to look inside, to stare into the abyss. Kyle leaned over, his face inches from the void. A sharp gasp escaped his lips. He jerked back violently, stumbling onto the damp ground. His eyes were wide, wild, his breathing ragged. "Something's down there," he whispered, voice barely audible. "I swear it was looking at me." All the boys scoffed at his reaction, but before they could pull him to his feet, a low sound rumbled from the well. It was faint at first, almost like a distant breath. Then it became a whisper. Then it became several voices speaking at once, indistinguishable from each other, yet insidious altogether. Then the whisper turned into a growl. Something moved in the darkness. Not the wind, not an animal. Something else. The flashlight beams waved as the group stepped back in terror. A shadow, darker than the bottom of the lowest parts of the well, began to rise from the well itself. It had no form, no shape, just an all-consuming blackness that pulsed with hate. Kyle screamed. He scrambled backwards, but it was too late. The darkness stretched out, tendrils coiling around his ankles. Before anyone could react, he was yanked forward. He clawed at the dirt, his nails digging into the earth as he shrieked. The others lunged, grabbing his arms, pulling with every ounce of strength that they had. But the well was stronger. With a final scream, Kyle was pulled into the abyss. His scream echoed for only a moment before being swallowed by the eternal silence of the well. The others ran. They didn't stop until they reached town, breathless, shaking, unwilling to look back. They told the police, but no one believed them. The town has remained silent about it, but the legend has continued, being whispered about behind closed doors, passed down to those who would listen. But one thing was certain: no one ever went looking for that well again. A group of college friends were on a road trip through the thick forested area in the Pacific Northwest. The dense trees loomed over the narrow, winding road, casting long shadows under the fading sunlight. The group was laughing and reminiscing about their college experiences, but they were also really enjoying the isolation and freedom of the open road. They had been driving for a while without seeing another car when their headlights illuminated something strange. There was a person, and they were standing at the edge of their eyesight in the road. It was a man, barefoot, dressed in an old-fashioned suit that looked decades out of place. His pale face turned towards them, and his sunken eyes seemed to have a gleam in the reflection of the headlights. The friends debated stopping. Although he wasn't flagging them down or showing them any signs of distress, the sight of him gave everybody an uneasy feeling. Ultimately, curiosity won out, and they pulled over feet ahead of him. "Are you okay?" one of them called out to him through the window. The man stepped forward slowly, his movements slightly stiff and mechanical. When he spoke, his voice was hollow, almost echoing. "I need a ride," he said. Every instinct screamed at them to drive away, but leaving him here alone just felt wrong. After a tense pause, they opened the back door to let him in. The man didn't offer much conversation, just vague mentions of needing to get back and where something had ended. He clutched a small book in his hands, refusing to let it go. As they drove on, the mood in the car shifted. The air grew heavier, and a sense of dread seeped into the group. The man sat silently, staring straight ahead, his presence unsettling, yet impossible to ignore. One of the friends, a guy named Jake, tried to lighten the mood. "So, where are you headed?" he asked with a forced cheerfulness. The man turned his head slowly, his eyes locking onto Jake's. "Back where it ended," he said, his voice chillingly calm. The friends exchanged nervous glances, but said nothing to each other. The forest felt darker, even though it was still 7 p.m. The road was becoming more winding, and the man's presence became increasingly oppressive in their minds. Suddenly, the GPS they had been following closed out by itself. They tried to reopen it, but it wouldn't work. It just kept closing out. They were now driving blind through the dense woods. After what felt like an eternity, they approached a clearing. In the middle of these dark, desolate woods stood a church. The man spoke for the first time in miles. "This is the place," he said, his tone filled with finality. Without waiting for a response, he opened the car door and stepped out. The friends watched as he walked towards the church, his figure disappearing into the shadows of the structure. "Should we follow him?" one of them asked. But the group collectively decided against it. Most of them wanted to leave and put as much distance between themselves and that place as possible. They couldn't just leave him though, so they all got out to find him. The area around the church was eerily silent. They could not even hear the sound of animals, crickets, or anything. They all went towards the church and went in. The church looked like it had been abandoned for some time. Everything was still there, but it was covered in dust and spiderwebs. It's like the people that used to attend this church left in a hurry and never looked back. They looked around, but they never found the man. When they left the church, it was suddenly pitch black outside. They had only been in there for a few minutes, but now the moon was high in the sky. They all walked in haste to get to the car to get out of there. As they turned the car around, the headlights briefly illuminated the church's broken stained glass windows. In the flicker of light, They all saw the same thing. A crowd of pale faces pressed against the glass, watching them intently. Terrified, they sped away, not stopping until they reached the next town. They told the story to the locals, only to be met with grim expressions. "That church burned down 50 years ago," one old man explained. "It was full of people at the time. No one made it out alive. They say the spirits linger, and every now and then, there are stories that someone finds a hitchhiker that says they're going back to where it ended." A group of friends were on their way to a secluded cabin in the Appalachian Mountains for a weekend getaway. The drive was long, winding through dense forests and narrow, forgotten roads. They had rented a place deep in the woods, far from cell service and the chaos of city life. As they laughed and talked about their plans for the weekend, the road twisted into darkness. The only light came from their headlights, cutting through the thick fog that had suddenly rolled in. The road narrowed even more, until finally, they spotted an old wooden bridge. This bridge was the only way to cross the deep ravine below. The bridge looked ancient, the wood warped and rotting in places, but their GPS insisted this was the only route. As they approached, they noticed something strange. A young boy stood at the entrance of the bridge, his clothes ragged, his face pale, with no expression. His eyes seemed too dark, almost hollow. He stood motionless, staring at them. The friends exchanged nervous glances. "Where did he come from?" one of them asked. "There's nothing out here for miles," another whispered. Despite their growing unease, they couldn't just drive past a child standing alone in the middle of nowhere. One of them rolled down the window. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The boy didn't respond. He only raised a single finger and pointed right at them. That was enough. The driver gripped the wheel and said, "Nope, nope, nope," before slowly maneuvering around the boy and driving onto the bridge. As the car rolled forward, an ear-splitting scream erupted from behind them. It wasn't the sound of a child, though. It was deeper, twisted, inhuman. Panic set in. The driver slammed the accelerator, desperate to get off the bridge. The old planks creaked and groaned beneath the weight of the car, but they didn't care. Then the headlights flickered as they were driving at high speed. For a moment, everything went dark. When the lights came back on, the boy was standing directly in front of the car. The driver swerved violently, barely avoiding him, and the car skidded on the solid ground as the tires gripped on the other side of the bridge. No one dared to look back. They finally reached the cabin in complete silence. No one spoke of what they had seen. No one wanted to. But in the back of their minds, they all knew something was terribly wrong. That night, sleep did not come easily. The wind howled through the trees, and the wooden walls of the cabin creaked as though they were breathing. Then, at exactly 3:07 a.m., a single knock echoed through the cabin. No one moved. Another knock. Then, a child's voice. "You shouldn't have crossed. You shouldn't have crossed the bridge." The door flung open, even though no one had touched it. The night swallowed the cabin in darkness, and the screams of the friends joined the whispers of the forest. The next day, the owner of the cabin went by to say hi to the group of friends who had rented the cabin. When they approached the property, they noticed that the front door was open. They walked in and looked around, looking for their customers. but they noticed the cabin was empty. The beds were unmade. The car still parked outside, but the friends were gone, vanished without a trace. Days later, a local hiker passed by the old wooden bridge and saw something strange. 5 new carvings had appeared in the bridge's wooden planks. Each one had a name. It was the name of all of the friends who had rented the cabin. And at the edge of the bridge, a boy stood, waiting for the next travelers to cross. Hey, Spooky Sooner here. Next stories we have coming up are Dates from Hell, Part 2, Creepy Roommate Stories, Part 2. I hope you guys like the Nightmare on Elm Street story. Nightmare on Elm Street was one of my favorite movies when I was younger, so I enjoyed writing that one. That was pretty fun. I was thinking about doing Friday the 13th stories, things like that. If you guys like stuff like that, just let me know in the comments. If you have any recommendations or you want me to narrate stories that you have created or to take a look at and then I can modify them, let me know. Or if you just hear some great story that you want me to narrate, I can do that as well. Till next time, be careful when you're in the woods driving and stay spooky. They din. Something moved into darkness. Something moved into dark. Something moved into darkness. A group of college friends were on a road trip through a thick. The man stepped forward shortly. Shoot. Oh, hey. Are you loud enough? Am I being loud enough? He clutched a small, tattered book. The air felt heavier, and a sense of dread seeped into the group's mind. And the man's presence became increasingly oppressive. That church burned down a long time ago, one old man explained. It was full of people at the time. No one made it out alive because they were trapped by someone locking them inside. We don't know who or why they were locked in, but there was a shovel that was in place locking the front doors. They say the spirits still linger there, and every now and then there are stories that someone finds a hitchhiker that says they're going back to where it ended.